Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. Thanks to Tom Albrecht who suggested I do a video on my dust collection system, so here goes. I certainly don't have all the answers on dust collection. I started my central dust collection unit when I first started getting into woodworking shortly before I retired and before I got into wood turning, and it's just sort of evolved. I did do a little, quite a bit of research, and I've done a lot of research along the way, including reading this book on woodshop dust control by Sandor, Nagyszalanczy. It's a complex system, and the more you study on it, sometimes the more confused you get. But I just want to leave you with a few, just a few items before I walk you through my dust collection system in my shop. Respiratory protection should be a major concern to wood turners. Unlike a lot of other safety issues that are of immediate concern, dust collection is one that it just keeps growing and growing and gets worse and worse, and sooner or later it can catch up with you. An example would be Mike Mahoney, who's a world-class wood turner and demonstrator who has turned all his life and has been exposed to a lot of dust, and now it's reached the point where he made the comment that when he goes to a symposium where he's demonstrating several times, it takes him a week or more to get over his respiratory and sinus problems from the exposure to dust. So it's not something to take lightly. You'll never design a system that will effectively collect the wood shavings you get. What you're really concentrating in on is the wood dust that you're going to, the very fine dust particles that are going to hurt your respiratory system. For the shavings, you need a broom and a dustpan. Another key point is a dust collection system with a 4-inch flex hose is never going to be effective as a central dust collection system. And that's what I have, and it's not real effective. It can be effective if you hook it up to one machine at a time with a very, very short hose. And for a lot of people, that might be all the dust collection that they need as a primary, is hooking it right up to a hood right on their lathe. Another key point is a shop vac can be handy on cleaning your shop. The shop vac will never be the basis for an effective dust collection system that'll protect your lungs. There's two great sources on dust collection that I'd have you look at, and I've got both of them in the description to this video. One of them is by Bill Pence, who's done a tremendous amount of research on dust collection and has respiratory problems from dust, so it's a major health concern to him, and he's taken it very seriously and put many hours of research that he shares with you on his site. The other one is jpthene.com, who developed a pre-separator, and I'll show you mine shortly. And you might want to look at that because it can be very effective at hooking that up to your dust collection system to help collect the larger dust and filter it out. So my final warning is take respiratory protection seriously. Do what you can. I've seen shops that have that can be somewhat effective by having a window unit near their lathe that pulls the dust out. That has an open door in another part of the shop where that allows the air in to replace the air that's getting sucked out, and that can be effective. Having a fan blowing dust away from you can certainly help. Sanding with an oil wax mixture to keep the fine dust particles down can be an effective measure, or certainly can help. And if you're doing a lot of power sanding, you might want to consider power sanding outdoors as another. So do what you can. A personal respirator such as this Trend Trend Air Shield can be very effective. I would say cheapy dust masks like this that are nuisance dust masks will provide you no control, no protection whatsoever, and give you a false sense of protection, but they're not really doing anything for you. They're not rated by OSHA, and they're just not going to do any good. Some other less expensive items like a Dust Be Gone mask can help. It won't be as good as a really good as a respirator, but they provide better dust control or protection from those fine dust than these little nuisance masks. So now let me show you my dust collection system. Alright, I'm going to walk you through the shop showing the routing of my dust collection pipe. I'm using 4-inch sewer and drain, which is much thinner and much cheaper than schedule 44-inch pipe, and it also has a slightly different dimension. But here it's connected to my rigid, which has a 4-inch flex hose, but it has an adapter that steps it down to about 2 inches because that rigid is designed for a shop vac. You can see right here I have a gate. I have to close every gate except for the one in use. I've got a mount, so it mounts this sewer and drain, and I've got this 45-degree angle, and then let me see if I can walk around and show you the bend, where I try to minimize the sharp angles and turns that it takes. So you can see here down near the bottom it takes a 45-degree angle. Here you can see the connection to my router table, which again is 4-inch, that steps down to an adapter because that's what was on my router table. And then I've got a flex hose that runs around, and let me show you that. So the flex hose from my router table joins in this Y. The Y adapter is a much smoother flow and causes less turbulence, is more efficient than a T. You'd never want to use a T if you can avoid it. And again, there it is, fastened against the wall, and it moves forward. And then it goes toward the back. One end goes into my dust collector, which I'll show you in a moment. So here it goes into a Y that's a 5-inch off this Harbor Freight dust collecting system, and then comes off of the rest of my system, which I'll show you momentarily. Let me show you a big dust bunny. That one right there on the floor is when things started getting stopped up right here in that Y, and I had to, when I wasn't feeling any suction, I had to remove that Y adapter to the dust collector, and there was a big lump collected in there because there's a small cross grate to catch big things from hitting the impeller. Stepping back, I want to show you my pre-separator. This is the original pre-separator I had that I picked up for about $25. I don't use it anymore. It's an awful system, and I want to show you the one I replaced it with. So I replaced that plastic one with one I constructed that's called a thin dust collector, and I'll show you a link to that. But basically, similarly, you have an input and an output, but the input comes down at an angle, and then it hits this baffle, and actually here's the input that comes in. The dust is coming in here. It hits this elbow, and it shoots along this baffle until it reaches this opening here, and then the heavier stuff drops down. The lighter stuff keeps on going, and because of this baffle here, it doesn't suck any of the fines out of the can, and they get sucked up in a kind of a whirlpool vortex down the middle of this thing. So it's a pretty simple basic operation. There's variations of it. I've routed a groove here so it fits in the lid, and I put some gasket sealer on the can so the suction holds it down. Simply the weight, like this, and then I use a bungee cord to kind of give it a little extra assist in case it gets bounced around or something in operation. So then I've got the input comes in here, be fastened down, and then the output to the dust collector fits right here. And this is a fairly efficient system. It does create some loss of suction, but the good news is it collects a lot of the heavier dust and shavings that land in here, and this is much easier to empty than the tiny fines that get in here, and it fills up multiple times. I fill this up before I have to actually empty my dust collector. When it comes to clamps for your flex hose, these thumb twist clamps cost a little bit more, but they are very, very handy, far more easier to use than the kind where you have to bend over and get down with a screwdriver, such as this type right here. These are just a real pain. They work and they're cheaper, but if you have to take these things apart, which I find a dust collection system is kind of a continuous project. You're always tweaking it. It is a bit of an effort. I have my 4-inch hose running about 18 inches off the floor, and the reason is so I didn't have to elevate it any higher because of the loss of suction, to have it run to the top of the shop and across and then down. This is about the same height as it goes into my dust collector, and I find it much more efficient. It does block the wall, but that doesn't cause me any major problems. The unit on the right is actually steps down to a smaller hose that I kind of use as a shop vac in this immediate area. It's doesn't have a real good suction. The other one, and that's a plastic store-bought gate. This one, you can see I actually made the gate, and they're not hard to make. There's plans on the internet. If you're making a bunch of them, you can save a lot of money if money is a concern. You can see again the sewer and drain is my long run down through the shop. It probably runs so maybe close to 30 feet that I pull the flex hose off of it. Here's the connection to the bandsaw. You can see on the bandsaw it has 2 ports. It has one on the front in the door built in, and then one on the side, and they both come off and go into a T adapter with a gate before it goes into the main 4-inch line. I said my dust collector to the bandsaw comes through the door, but actually it's one in the rear and one on the side. I misspoke there. Here's my jointer. Gets very little use, maybe every couple of years, so I've got it covered. It's on wheels, so I move it into a location where I can put a pipe onto it. Here's my thickness planer, same thing. It's on mobile wheels, and I can move it into position, and I'll show you where I connect it to a pipe. Here's the connection that I use for when I need to plug in another hose temporarily for my thickness planer or jointer, and I just take that cap off and put a hose on it right there, and that's right between the lathe and the bandsaw. And then here's the dust hood that I use for the lathe when I'm sanding. At one time I used this big plastic Big Gulp, and I had it mounted on a stand on a chair roller office chair base so I could move it around behind the lathe, but I found that to be more trouble than it was worth, so I got rid of that and went to this smaller one, which I already had. And let me show you how that fastens onto the lathe. Basically, I made an L bracket, sawed into the side here with a bandsaw, cut this groove, and then glued it back together here. Put a T-nut in here with this slot piece of plywood where I can just loosen this, and then I can slide this backwards or forwards. Turns out probably the dimensions were off a little bit. It shouldn't have had to go back that far, so this sticks out further than it needs to, but I haven't bothered to redesign it or fix it. This was designed where it could slide up or down, but there's no purpose for that. You get it pretty much centered in it, and it works fine. Now, I know a lot of people will take their 4-inch main and they'll just fasten it on right here with a bungee cord and move it around. This is a bit of a hassle, but I can move it down and back and get it into position without too much effort. I'd like to make one on an articulating arm, but I haven't got around to that yet, and I don't want it to mount on this cast iron arm on the lathe because I occasionally use that for other things, so I don't want to be restricted to that. So I haven't figured out how to fasten it down yet with an articulating arm, nor have I been motivated to do so. Now I want to show you this light I have up here. I have a fine layer of dust all through my shop. So the system I've got is far from perfect. Let me just give you an example. You can see, I think you can probably see the dust coming off of there, and I have that all through my shop, including the lights and my heating on top of all the heating and cooling ducts throughout my shop. I do have this jet air filtration system in my shop that hopefully collects some of the fines. I use it only when I'm generating fine dust. It's about the only time I use it. It does have a removable filter on the front that I can blow it out periodically, and every few months I've got to take that off and go inside and get the bag system out and blow it out. And it helps. I have the remote connected on a string right behind the lathe, one of the two remotes, to make it very convenient when I'm sanding. I just reach out and grab it. I didn't want to be losing a remote. The other remote I've actually got fastened on the my dust collection unit itself. So here's the heart of my dust collection system. It's a Harbor Freight, I think they call it a 2 horsepower. It's a 110. It came with 2 cheap bags that were very inefficient. I think they could only filter to 30 microns, which is inadequate. You need to get it to at least down to 95% efficiency. I think maybe about 5 microns. I got rid of those when I was able to buy this 6-foot shaker felt bag on sale at Rockler at a very modest price. So when I put that on, I could actually go to plastic here. If you have plastic, which certainly won't breathe any air, you do have to have a larger bag. You can't just take one of the cloth bag off of the unit and replace it with plastic, or it'll restrict your airflow too much. Here's that other remote that I have, and I have these little clips that I keep here handy when I do have to replace the empty plastic bag, throw it away. It makes it a lot easier to use these to fasten this on temporarily while you're jockeying this band, which is a real hassle to get on. So I've got about 3 of those so I can go around and clip it. Mounted on the wall is my dust collector switch unit that actually receives the signal from the 2 remotes. So the power cord from my dust collector unit is plugged into that, and I've got it just hanging on my French cleat system, which I use throughout my shop. French cleat, French cleat, French cleat. Here's a stationary downdraft table I picked up very inexpensively. I think at Harbor Freight it was on sale, steeply discounted, but basically you put in a 4-inch connector. I think I might have taken off the 2-inch connector for a shop vac and retrofitted it for a 4-inch line using this tin can. But I rarely use it because I don't like to sand. If I'm doing a lot of heavy sanding with, say, a palm sander or an electric sander, I generally go outside.